Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The movie podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
Welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. It's going to be a fantastic show this week with 3 brand new reviews. We have 3 reviews that are all playing in theaters. This week on the show, Denzell Washington is back and Justice Knows No Borders and the Equalizer 3. The chocolate chips are back with more nuts. And finally, Don't Rush, Die Slow is the tagline for a movie about a killer sloth in a sorority house. And the limited theatrical release is Slotherhouse. God, these last 2 taglines make me feel like I've hit a new low on this show. And it's been a while since I've had a short film review on the show. So I just saw a film that premiered on YouTube on September 3rd that is available to watch right now. And that is entitled Check Yourself, a film by Marion F. III. We've got a lot to cover this week, so ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows to watch, a roar and a burst of flame.
The Movie Wire Podcast.
You meet people like me.
The Wire.
And here we go.
A young man moves to Las Vegas to pursue his dream of becoming a magician, only to end up joining a male stripper group called the Chocolate Chips in Back to the Strip.
So you think about putting the band back together, huh? But I don't think that group will work out now.
Stop acting like you don't miss it. I mean, the women, the cheers, the tips, the tips.
I do? But how you gonna do that with your leg?
My dancing days is over, but I got a ringer.
I am not a clown. I'm a magician.
You need to tell your face.
Boy, when you moving out? I am tired of sneaking men in. The last one I had there was so loud. When I let him come in my back door, I was scared he was gonna wake you up.
But we ain't got no back door.
I got you something you needed.
Mom, thanks, but it's a one-way ticket.
There's only one way you're gonna do this, Merlin. Your way.
Once upon a time, we had the finest male dancing troupe in town, the Chocolate Chips. It was a gold mine. Mr. Face, Mr. Body, Mr. Slim Sexy, Dr. X, and the one and only Mr. Big. Why don't you go get ready? You got a tough crowd waiting for you.
You want me to go out there alone and be a stripper? But I'm a magician.
Can't. Ain't no camp in Vegas.
Wait!
Good Lord.
Are you seeing what I'm seeing?
We back in business.
You haven't talked to the Chips in years. How are you gonna find them?
Are you out of your goddamn mind? Excuse me, Lord, but that's got to be the stupidest idea I ever heard in my life.
Quadruplets?
We had fun back then.
Ooh, didn't we?
Let's give it up for Dr. Xander Pike.
Sandra's right.
Thus the mask.
And the flat ass.
It's time for you to get on stage and do it your way.
5, 6, 7.
I can't do the left side if he's moving right.
This is not a little nonsense. Turn. Without further ado, ladies, the Chocolate Chips! It's showtime, brother.
Hey, let's go with a bang, guys.
Bang, bang! Bang, bang, or bang, 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 bang? Your bangs up, your bangs up too high.
Yeah, he overbanging.
Now, Back on the Strip has a lot of passion and energy from its cast. We can feel the chemistry and fun factor when the cast interacts with each other. But what Back to the Strip reminded me of was a weekend of binge drinking with a group of friends in my 20s, where we all give each other high fives and we say this weekend is gonna be awesome. But then we forgot we invited that one person that doesn't drink and his girlfriend just broke up with him, so we would feel bad for not inviting him. and he starts to bring down the vibe with each and every day. And in the case of Back to the Strip, our cast would have been the group of friends ready for the fun weekend, but our writers are the dumped, sober friend that just ruins everything. And I'm talking about new writer Eric Daniel and writer and director Chris Spencer in his first major motion picture. But don't get me wrong, there are a handful of fun moments in Back to the Strip and an energy that really does keep us engaged. I can see the filmmakers really did want to make something special with this film. Back to the Strip takes our main character Merlin, played by Spence Moore II, who dreams of becoming a professional magician. With support from his mom, Verna, played by Tiffany Haddish, and his best friend and big-time crush, Robin, played by Reagan Harris, Robin then gets engaged to a successful online sensation, Blaze, played by Ryan Alexander Holmes. Merlin now needs to step up his game and move to Vegas to try and make it in Vegas as an all-star magician, in the attempt to win Robin over before it's too late. Now, this is what confuses me about wannabe magician Merlin. From the start of the movie to the end of the movie, Merlin is just a horrible magician and never really shows any skill whatsoever with practicing magic his whole life. Even when we see Merlin at a kid's birthday party, it's questionable. And this is where I start to question the support from his best friend Robin and his mother. Merlin needs a support team to be the ones to really say, you know what, Merlin? Your act is just pretty crappy. It isn't that good. And because of this fact, this is where we start to lose credibility of what the movie is really aiming for. Now, when Merlin arrives in Vegas, here is where he runs into an old and out-of-date stripper, Luther, aka Mr. Big, played by Wesley Snipes. Mr. Big and Merlin come up with a plan to bring their once famous stripper group, the Chocolate Chips, back together. But each one comes with their own obstacle. We have now a church pastor, Amos, aka Slim Sexy, played by JB Smooth. We have Desmond, aka Da Body, played by Pheasant Love, who has gained quite a bit of weight. We have Tyreek, aka Da Face, played by Bill Bellamy, who now has a litter of kids. And finally, we have Xander, aka Dr. X, played by Gary Owen. And I will leave this conflict or obstacle to your surprise. Every character here has their own unique energy to add to each other, but this is what the problem is. By the time we should see these characters react to each other as a team, or should be in unison after getting back together, they start to act alone as they're all doing their own stand-up comedy act. The chemistry starts to decrescendo as we start to get to know the characters, and they start to lose credibility and interest of our male stripper team. But we are at a constant feeling that something's missing. The way we should be feeling feels way different than the attempt we are seeing on screen. And some of this could have been helped by more inclusion shots and smarter shots of our cast on screen by director Spencer, but we really don't get any rhyme or reason to where the camera is going here. Spencer's almost doing a strategy as it's okay as long as the audience can see what's going on the screen. But it's a lot of camera shots that just really don't make sense, and it doesn't complement the comedic timing or the performances. And we do see this a lot from new directors, but it is more prominent here, and it is a misstep in where this movie should go. It detaches from the audience. What the problem we have with Back to the Strip is the fact it tries to do way too much, and it has too many characters and conflicts to really have a proper balance. While watching, I was reminded of the movie The Full Monty. There we had a simplistic plot about a group of guys with simplistic conflicts and vices that they've never stripped before. And where that formula was successful was the fact it kept it simple and focused on the characters to really give us something to root for. And this is where we see a lack of confidence from the writers. They don't have any confidence in their storytelling abilities to really have these characters shine. Instead, we have the movie narrated throughout the runtime by Merlin's mom, again played by Tiffany Haddish. But this is completely unnecessary and doesn't make sense on how she can narrate Merlin's every move when the film is taking in current tense. And they're in different states. Their narration becomes distracting and brings the movie down. What we could have gotten instead is more time with the characters interacting with each other rather than just listening to a narration. This shows a lack in the writer's ability to really let these characters shine. We don't want to be told what they're doing. We want to see these characters interact. We have an electrifying, great cast here. Let these characters do their thing. And on top of the narration, we have a plot and subplot, and the writers get it wrong on which one to focus on. The focal point plot is that of winning Merlin's crush away from her online superstar Blaze, and the chocolate chips are the subplot that are meant to support, but the subplot doesn't really do anything to support, except for intending to give us a feel-good climax that never really gets there. The movie got the focus backwards, because I was more intrigued about the chocolate chip storyline than a generic love story that I could really care less about, because the writers didn't give any real reason for me to care about it. And by the time we get to the climax, which I did enjoy to an extent, and it did bring a smile to my face, but at first thought is that it could have been so much more. And there was a subtle hint of disappointment as I walked out of the theater. Back to the Strip at times can bring a smile to your face, and with an electrifying, engaging talent on board, it will keep your attention for the runtime. But at the same time, during this runtime, I felt a disconnect from the characters and a sense of amateurish filmmaking, and a climax with the feeling of wanting something more. But I will say this about Back to the Strip. At some point, this movie will be turned on in my home as just a silly movie to watch past midnight when I just don't want to think. I'm giving Back to the Strip 2 stars. Now, just shortly after this show started, I received a message from another movie podcaster asking me to be a guest on his show. It was the first time appearing on another podcast. And since then, I have been on this beautiful man's show multiple times, talking movies such as The Producers, movie adaptations of William Shakespeare, 4 Rooms, Strange Days, and many, many more. And that's with Antonio over at the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast. There are so many great moments and discussions, but there is a special episode I appeared on last summer that stands up against the rest. This was such a successful episode that we decided to bring a sequel with double the movies and double the episodes. Part 1 of the Cultworthy Presents High School Royale 2, me and Antonio discussed the 1995 film Angus and 1982's Class of 1984. And just released is now Part 2, where we discuss 1995's Mr. Holland's Opus and 1976 Massacre at Central High, in which me and the Cultworthy might have a slight disagreement. Let's take a listen to a sneak preview of those 2 episodes now.
It's a very special time of year, everyone. It's back to school with my compadre of cinema podcasting, Justin Henson of The Movie Wire. We're back to do it again.
This one was kind of the underdog during theatrical release. It kind of flew under the radar, and I still remember an empty theater when I went to go see it.
This had to go up against films like Clueless, right? When it comes to the humor, when it comes to the romance, when it comes to the pop culture, when it comes to the soundtrack. By all means, I consider this to be in the top 5 soundtracks of the 90s.
1984, this one was kind of the tail end of the Hollywood Revolution, which I kind of appreciate. Beginning origin of the slaughter movies that just took off in the 80s. We saw the birth of these movies come from Class of 1984.
Mark L. Lester is one of my favorite underrated directors of the 80s and 90s. This guy is, to me, one of like the last tradesman directors. Is it a horror movie? Fine, I'll take it. An action movie or a roller skating movie. I got you. I can do this.
Round 2.
What really killed this movie for me per se, and there are some good things in here that we'll talk about, is the musical score, the musical transitions. It was a complete distraction, and I swear to God, I think 45 minutes into it, if I heard an oboe in the background one more time, I was going to scream.
And that's the thing. This is a cult classic. There are people that absolutely love this movie. I love what this movie represents and what it started. It doesn't mean that like I'm watching this every weekend. And that last act of the movie is essentially Heather's beat for beat.
Mr. Holland's Opus has a special thing about it where it's so cliche that it actually proves a great point, and it actually does some brilliant stuff to really tug at those heartstrings. It's almost Shakespearean to a point with some of the characters that get inserted.
I do have a problem with it being like a slower, less aggressive Forrest Gump, where it's going to take us through the decades and through all the different things in history.
We have 2 fantastic episodes that are both available to listen on the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast now. The link will be in the description of this episode. Don't miss it. Tune in today. Robert McCall finds himself at home in southern Italy, but he discovers his friends are under the control of crime bosses. As events turn deadly, McCall knows what he has to do. Becomes his friend's protector by taking on the mafia in the Equalizer 3.
9 seconds. That's what I'll give you to decide your fate.
Ciao Roberto.
Roberto, tell me, what did you do back home?
Government work. I'm retired now.
Because of these people, I'm beginning to understand real peace.
They see you as one of us now.
And I believe this is where I'm supposed to be.
This happens in many towns.
The mafia. They're like cancer. No cure.
Whatever you and your friends do, do it somewhere else.
You burning me?
I'm preparing.
Is that a Timex?
No, it's a burger.
You seem like a man who understands violence.
I like this place.
You can't take that from me.
I can take anything I want.
Police found multiple dead bodies on that farm in Sicily. Did you kill him?
Do I look like a killer?
There is something comforting but violent to Denzell Washington's character portrayal of Robert McCall. He is somebody that we want to root for, even though his character lacks depth. It's the idea of McCall's character that the viewer can relate to, along with the on-screen performance and likability of Denzell Washington. Washington's performance, along with the idea of his character, can mask what we see on screen, which is a basic concept of a hero with thrown in over-the-top ideology of the written character. After watching The Equalizer 3, I came to realize how the Equalizer movies are a crowd pleaser, but when it comes to number 3, it's definitely a different kind of crowd pleaser. But what I also came to realize holistically how unbalanced this trilogy is. Now, I'm not saying the trilogy is bad, because here's what I really like about the trilogy, is that each movie can stand on its own as a first-time watch without knowing much or seeing the rest of the films. And those that did see the previous films won't really gain anything as a progression of this story, but they will see the character in a new light. But again, in a new light, lacking depth and progression that I would really hope to see in a third movie. Where we lack the actual depth of the character Robert McCall, we gain a holistic, feel-good sensation of community as McCall acts like a side character to the overall feel of this community. And we almost get the feeling that his character is placed in this movie as a feeling of hope. This is a superhero movie at its most subtle. Now, here's what I really enjoyed about the movie. The overall feel of the environment is brilliantly done by cinematographer Robert Richardson. From The Hateful Eight, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, last year's Emancipation, and this year's film, Air. Richardson really creates an environment where the viewer can feel like we're taken to a place that feels brand new. And this complements the story extremely well. And this also helps make the McCall character feel fresh in the environment of which she is placed. And this is also supported by returning direction of Antoni Fuqua from the previous Equalizer films, who knows his way around the camera and knows how to really capture moments to really engage with the audience, to have us part of this community. Fuqua also uses really smart lighting right from the start to the end of the film to really add that cool factor to what we are seeing on screen. His direction here when it comes to creating an environment and balancing our cast of characters to really feed into the motivation of McCall is truly spot on. But where we really start to see things unravel is during the climax, where it seems to rush itself into the action instead of really just easing us in. To the point I really wish I could have hit rewind to go back to the best parts, and that's the feel-good feelings and interactions of Denzell Washington interacting with this small town cast of characters. The Equalizer 3 goes from 0 to 100 in a transition to the climax, where it feels like we needed a moment to really deep dive into McCall's motivation and really understand the depth to his character, to gain investment in him, to care about what he does during the climax. But the movie banks on the previous two movies, assuming that we remember and we still care. But just like any movie, even though the character is very simplistic, it would be nice to have a little reminder of what the McCall character is all about. And I'm not saying Denzell Washington is bad, but instead I was concerned for the town of these cast of characters that really did win my heart. And I was rooting for the town more than I was rooting for Washington's character. Now, with Denzell Washington included, all the performances here are good, except for our special CIA agent Emma Collins, played by Dakota Fanning, who really seems to have trouble losing the soap opera feeling that she interprets her role as. I found her performance to be too much and her character almost unnecessary and distracting to the true soul of the movie. Her performance and character just doesn't work here, and to an extent actually did annoy me. You could have taken Dakota Fanning's role out and added more conversation in the Denzell Washington character to really nail down this town chemistry, but it sidetracks itself into a subplot that almost feels like it was thrown in to lengthen the movie, and at times doesn't really feel the need in this movie, but rather an excuse to throw some action in the surrounding story. The Equalizer 3 was written by Richard Wank, Richard Lenham, and Michael Sloan from the previous two Equalizer movies, and we can tell they had a little trouble on where to take our McCall character next, and have it stretch into the over 2 hour mark. And at times, Equalizer 3 does feel that it adds a lot of filler to push the runtime. Now, I have to be honest, the first Equalizer I like, second, And when it comes to the third one, I really did enjoy watching Denzell Washington adjust to his new environment, and feel this should have been a completely different movie. You didn't even have to title it Equalizer 3, but rather tell the story around this conflicted, damaged, but extremely intelligent man. Now, when I go to the movies and go to a movie like The Equalizer 3, I would expect to be entertained by action, but rather I was entertained by the amount of heart it puts into its characters to ensure its viewer is having fun with what they are seeing. Now, where I was disappointed is where we have the action. It stays below the line with nothing too special that Washington does to be memorable except the way he interacts with the local community. The action does stay below par compared to the other two movies, but it makes up for it for, again, the amount of heart it puts into the McCall character. But I have to say, this was an extremely entertaining film, and not because of the action. Now, most of this review is surrounded around positivity, relationships, acts of community, and the build of relationships, which is not what I thought I would be talking about with a majority of this review, or what I thought I'd be watching a majority of the movie. And even though some may feel disappointed here with the amount of action in The Equalizer 3, I was completely okay with this because the film was still engaging and entertaining to watch. But I get it, others may have a different perspective and a certain level of disappointment if you are just looking to see Denzell Washington have some super cool action scenes for its entire runtime. And this is where we're really going to have you're going to love it or hate it scenario here. But for me, I thought it was a pretty fair balance. The Equalizer 3, even though confusing to the franchise and feels like it should have been a couple sequels down the road, is still an entertaining ride just due to the fact we have Denzell Washington that is having the time of his life with the role and supporting cast. The Equalizer 3, even though flawed, was successful when it sought out to do, especially when we take it being the third entry in this trilogy with a simplistic character. But in general, holistically, given the entire Equalizer trilogy, the feel, the tone, the balance, the stories, they're just way off, and the opposite of being equalized. But as an individual film, The Equalizer 3 works. I'm giving The Equalizer 3 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out my reviews on previous episodes for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now. Now available. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are back in a story and visual style that the new, old, and current Turtle fans can all enjoy in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. That cowabunga its way to 3 stars. It's not real is the tagline to the Boogeyman, which I would rather see a monster in my closet than to view this movie again, receiving 1.5 stars. A legend will face his destiny in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which I wish we could have turned the dial the other way in hopes of a better movie. Dial of Destiny received 2 stars. The Legend of Dracula is born and beautiful to look at, but the story should have stayed at sea in The Last Voyage of the Demeter, receiving 2.5 stars. And finally, it's pretty awkward and not a love story in the comedy No Hard Feelings, which actually did have some feelings to it, receiving 3 stars. Make sure you check up on those reviews, and while you do, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe, and don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, as some of you have heard on my show here in the Seattle area, we just had open enrollment in our Snohomish Film Festival. I had a lot of fun helping to judge all the submissions, but sadly, submission is now officially closed. I just want to say thank you to all that submitted. There has been a lot of talent submit their projects, and I have to say what an insane amount of talent we have had this year submit their films. Now, even though submission is closed, still visit the Snohomish Film Festival page at www.filmfreeway.com/Snohomish Film Festival. There you can find more information on the festival and to buy tickets for September 9th from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. Don't wait till the last minute. September 9th is just around the corner. I will see you there. Now, lastly, there's a podcast that I just love to drop in and visit on his show once in a while to loosen the tie, have a drink or two, and just have a great conversation about whatever topic he brings to the table. And you can catch my latest appearance in the first episode of Season 4 that will be released in just a couple weeks. He is a great friend, a fantastic host, and a true gentleman to put up with some of the things I bring to his show. And that's Dan over at the Casting Views podcast. Let's hear from Dan over at Casting Views now.
Fancy taking a humorous trip down a random topic each week? You do? Well, you're in luck. Casting Views, presented by me, Dan, and a host of guests, bring you just that. With topics from the world of entertainment, science, sport, and everyday life, there's bound to be a topic that's going to inform and amuse. Catch Casting Views every Sunday on all listening platforms now.
Emily Young, a senior, wants to be elected as her sorority's president. She adopts a cute sloth, thinking it can become the new mascot to help her win the election, until a string of fatalities implicate the sloth as the main suspect in the murders in Slotherhouse.
So cute. What is that?
That's a sloth. If you're interested, I could sell you that one.
They're really that slow?
Maybe they just tricked us all.
In the jungle, she's a beta, but out here, she's an alpha.
Alpha?
It is a wild animal. You don't even know what it eats.
You can't keep that here. The house rules say no pets.
I wanted to introduce it as the new house mascot.
Sigma, Lambda, Beta! Alpha?
It's a Slotherhouse.
Oh, God.
Good God, this movie is ridiculous. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. In the movie, we have a character state the line, "She's like a cute Chucky." This is a quote from Slotherhouse, and that is a completely accurate description of this menacing sloth that murders and terrorizes a sorority, but not without reason that Slotherhouse hints throughout the runtime. Now, Slotherhouse is a film about a slow-moving, or so what we would think a sloth that terrorizes a sorority house would be, a plot that I was sure was going to end up on some sort of streaming platform when it was announced. It is just so beyond ridiculous, and writers Bradley Fowler and Caddy Lanigan know this and win the contest for the So Crazy It Works category, and what's going to be their most talked about film in their career. But this is also all about the execution, and that is also due and thanks to director Matthew Goodhue. Now, honestly, Slotherhouse, I really tried to hate. I really tried to find flaws. And yes, there are many. But this movie is more deep, symbolic, clever, well executed, and oh so much fun than it has any right to be. Even though stupid, ridiculous, and bonkers at times, I can't help to say that this is one of the more fun times I had sitting in a theater with a crowd of people. Now, first and foremost, before we get into some details, this is a movie that knows exactly what it is, and it embraces it fully. And again, this is thanks to the direction of Goodhue. The premise here is bonkers, but the performances and the well-executed direction, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but actually pulled this movie off to be a satisfying, fun, and yes, at times dumb, but the special thing about it is that it acknowledges that these moments are dumb. And instead of showing a lack of confidence in the filmmaking, it doubles down and steps on the gas by making it known. Now, what I really appreciate about the execution and the writing here is that the filmmakers don't go out to try and entertain and impress the audience with a lot of kill counts, shock factor kill scenes. These moments are subtle and they are present, but well utilized, and may I add, with great music, support, and composition in the background. What really took me by surprise with this movie is the amount of care the filmmakers put into it. And yes, I did say care in a movie like Slotherhouse, but the filmmakers really avoid temptation of going the route of shock factor and pure gore that we see from a lot of these killer animal B movies. But Slotherhouse just gives the audience enough for those looking for a fun, ridiculous slasher picture, but also enough style and finesse from director Goodhue to really balance this movie out from horror comedy and, dare I say it, tones that actually support the subtle but present messaging the movie sneaks in. This movie does, believe it or not, have a message. Slotherhouse, even by its title, is assumed to be ridiculous, but follows Emily, played by Lisa Ambelevenar, from the TV shows Doctors and The A-List, and the more recent TV show Titans. Emily cares about animals and suddenly wants a pet, but can't have a dog due to her sorority house rules. Emily is encouraged to become the new sorority house president against her side villain mean girl on steroids, Brianna, played by Sydney Craven. But Emily lacks the confidence and belief in herself until she then rescues a sloth with obvious issues that I will leave out the nitty-gritty details so you can discover these for yourselves. But Emily and most of the characters don't see any issues with this adorable sloth that is later named Alpha to become the sorority's mascot and to gain her popularity in the sorority. Now we have this sloth that's taken out of the jungle who automatically knows how to browse the web, lounge, open a beer bottle, take selfies, and even drive a car. And in most cases like this is where my blood pressure would rise and I would talk about how stupid this movie was, how stupid the concept was, and this is where I'd usually go on a rant in the review. But what Slotherhouse does, and it actually takes its time to earn and build the right to be ludicrous, and it never takes itself too seriously. It knows exactly what it wants to be and how it wants to portray its messaging. It obviously knows what it is, and the filmmakers really have some fun with it. But the difference between this and all the other awful B movies that it tries to be like is that it has attention to detail. We see some likable characters and we see some really dislikable intentional characters like Brianna, but the filmmakers contrast these characters so well that we know exactly what they're trying to do. Every attention to detail when it comes to the characters, camera shots, and even the composition support from the music are spot on when it comes to building this right to be ridiculous. And when it comes to the actual kill scenes, they're not over the top and gory, but rather match the tone of the film perfectly. Just like we saw in the more recent Megan, that gave us just enough. This film follows the same path to really connect to the audience to give a different feeling of engagement, but yet still extremely entertaining. Now let's talk about the actual design of the star of the movie, the sloth Alpha. At times, Alpha is extremely creepy and mysterious, and this is just mostly during the first half when we start to learn about the character. You know, the character of the sloth. When we start to go into the second half, this is where the movie loosens up the audience a bit to just keep us on our toes and have some fun, but still edging to wonder what this sloth is going to do next. Even when Slotherhouse becomes cliche, it really truly has earned the right to be cliche, because when we get to the point of a sloth killing spree, it really at this point won over the audience. It's like going to a party not knowing anybody and thinking you're not going to have a good time. But after one person offers you a drink, we fast forward 2 hours later, and you're smiling, socializing, and you're telling everybody how much you love them. Everything that Slotherhouse leads up to is earned. It works for. It doesn't treat the material like it's another stupid, forgettable, straight-to-streaming horror movie that they cross their fingers and hope that 100 people see. The filmmakers are smart enough to know and focus on the characters, even though there isn't a lot of depth to them. They are still treated as likable, and they balance out the fun just as much as our sloth. The characters are good at keeping the audience's attention, even though the sloth isn't necessarily in the scenes. Slotherhouse even attempts to have multiple layers of symbolic messaging, including ties to social media, using the sloth as a vehicle to symbolize the threat of slow, cute, unassuming threat of an appearance on the outside before it becomes hazardous if you let your guard down. There are multiple layers to this movie that the filmmakers place in without attempting to be preachy, but also adds the viewer to think while having fun watching the ridiculous romp unfold on screen. And as much as I want to fight tooth and nail that Slotherhouse doesn't have a well-executed symbolic message, I can't. Some of the messaging I wish it would have gone deeper on, but I completely understand why the filmmakers and writers did it. And I know I'm asking way too much here, but as many will try and deny it or pass this movie off as just a fun, cheesy picture, I think it has much more to say than what we see on the surface. Which is exactly what holistically the movie's point is. Slotherhouse is a film that really did take me by surprise. I was creeped out at times by the mere intentional cheesiness of Alpha, I laughed a lot, and I actually did have a couple deep thoughts after leaving. This is a rare breed of filmmaking that never in my years going to the movies, I can picture myself saying this about a movie entitled Slotherhouse, is that this is the cheesiest, most universal, crowd-pleasing, smartest movie I have seen of its kind. And no way will I ever say this is a great movie, but I will say that this is a well-executed, smarter than it should be movie in almost every aspect. Slotherhouse is just a crowd-pleasing, fun time at the movies that you need to see with a big crowd of people. This movie is just a crowd-pleasing ton of fun. I'm giving Slotherhouse 3 stars. Now, it's been a while since I featured a new short film or spotlighted a new filmmaker, but I recently just saw a new short film that just recently premiered on YouTube on September 3rd. This new short film was released by a newer and what we should be seeing an up-and-coming filmmaker. The film is called Check Yourself, written and directed by Marion F. Johnson III, who surprisingly enough I have been patiently waiting for a film by Mr. Johnson for some time now. And I have to say, it was worth the wait. Check Yourself follows Sean, played by Sebastian Rose, who has a warning from his landlord, played by Patrick Kelleher, that he has until the end of the day to pay his rent or face eviction. This leads to a series of relatable situations that face Sean. Now, Check Yourself runs just under 6 minutes, and given the runtime, Johnson really ensures that the time is well utilized and gets a consistent pace and sense of engagement to a simplistic story. The main takeaway from this short film is Johnson's true eye for the magic shot that really engages with the viewer, where we see Johnson's smart use of camera shots to capture our Sean character's frustration. But not only that, to help support the consistent pacing is the spot-on editing. Here's what I love about short films, especially Check Yourself, is that it takes some risk on the technical aspects of it. The one thing that really stands out about Check Yourself is the music. The music is fun here, where Johnson doesn't follow the safe traditional short film stock music, but rather takes a risk with a more in-your-face heavy choice, in which I can respect to demand attention from the viewer. But not only that, but take an everyday situation and utilize the music to make an everyday situation feel like somebody's livelihood is at risk. And in the case of our main character, Sean, it is. Johnson doesn't go for over-the-top situational events, but rather everyday events and adds the technical aspects to make them relatable. The only real criticism I can say about Check Yourself is that I wish we could have had better audio quality from our main character Sean in the beginning, but all the other technical aspects following is drastically improved as the minutes go on. Overall, Marion F. Johnson III, I am still going to be following very closely to see where he takes his talent and watch where he goes, and I hope to see more films from him in the near future. If you want to take a watch of Marion F. Johnson III's new short, the link will be in the description of this episode. I'm giving Check Yourself a solid 3 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. I also want to give thanks to Marion F. Johnson III for a fantastic short film he introduced the show to. You can find the link to that short film in the description of this episode. Now you can also show support to this show by following me on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And do me a favor, make sure you stay for after the credits of a movie to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film and support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at Movie Wire Show, or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.